Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching what if Naruto was turned by a vampire on a mission. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
Naruto smiled as he strolled down the path, carrying his pack with some bandages, snacks, and other essentials, as well as the money from his most recent mission. He was thrilled to be home because he had gone on this mission by himself and could handle it without anyone else's help. Seeing Sakura added to the enjoyment of his return. His thoughts of his crush caused a slight flush to appear on his cheeks. Then he grimaced as he considered the harm she would cause if he was late. Once more he increased his speed and approached Konoha. In the shape of a sunset, night started to approach. Naruto let out a sigh. In any case, he was already running late, so why not take advantage of the situation and unwind? Focusing the chakra on his feet, he climbed easily onto a thick tree branch, zipped his jacket all the way up to keep the cold out, and ate some kind of energy bar while carefully holding the money in his lap to prevent theft. Although the cold wasn't particularly severe, it was a surefire indication that winter was approaching. Naruto recalled that foxes curl up and their tails help keep them warm during times like these, but I doubt the Kyuubi would help me grow a furry tail to snuggle in. He smiled, picturing a scene in which he and Sakura share a cup of ramen and cuddle under a big blanket to stay warm. Somehow, that doesn't seem realistic. He scowled. Regardless, she would prefer hot chocolate to ramen. Naruto grimaced. Things that sweet didn't appeal to him. Even though cake and chocolate were delicious, they were too sweet for him. As Naruto huddled closer to the tree, he thought, it's probably something to do with the Kyuubi, like how I heal faster and stuff. Probably can taste better, too. He closed his eyes. Before long, he was sound asleep. Naruto was startled awake and his eyes snapped open. Gazing at the man before him, he initially believed it to be Orochimaru because of the man's long, black hair, but Orochimaru was no longer there. But the man did resemble him in some ways. He had the same strange smile that he had always had when he looked at Sasuke, and his skin was pale enough to be Orochimaru's. However, the eyes were big and green, making the stranger look like a cat. I believe I found you, my child, Naruto spluttered, balancing precariously on the branch, catching the pouch containing the payment just before it fell off his lap entirely. Wah! Hey, creep, I'm not your kid, he exclaimed. The man laughed and said, so naive, but I suppose you'll learn. His smile, which had initially appeared to be quite normal, widened to reveal a large set of fangs. Naruto stood up on the branch that, in retrospect, appeared to be much too thin for such an action. Naruto had seen a lot of fangs in real life, at least enough to not be frightened of the man's odd appearance. He clenched his fists and said, you're going to try and take the money or pick a fight? Don't be silly, Naruto. The man's pronunciation of his name annoyed him. For someone who seemed intent on killing you, it seemed too affectionate. I merely want to give you something. Deterred for a moment, Naruto relaxed and asked suspiciously, give? Naruto lowered his fists as the man nodded and said, that's it. But as soon as he did, his right peripheral vision flashed with movement. He felt a sharp prick in his neck, then nothing. Eventually, you'll thank me for this, Naruto. His face felt hot and uncomfortable when he woke up. It was the sun. He recognized when he opened his eyes. He sat up and searched for the money, almost bursting with relief when he noticed it hung neatly on a tree stump. Breathing out, he said, thank Kami. He decided that he had stayed long enough, so he picked up the bag and started walking back toward his village, concluding that he had figured everything out along the way. He tried to recall more, but he struggled to recall, and before I passed out, I felt a pain about here. He touched his neck where he'd felt the thing pierce him, but was shocked to find nothing there. So, when I was asleep, some guy the first didn't know woke me up and said he had something to give me, and called me his child. Strange. He scowled, feeling the effects of the day's heat. Weird, and I don't like it. He ultimately made the decision to begin running. In addition to helping him cool off, the cool air hitting his face would get him there more quickly. Before long, he was facing the Konoha front gate calmly. He entered, let the guards identify him, and went on his way. Hey, Kiba, he said, gesturing to my fellow boy. Kiba exclaimed, Naruto, you're back. Akamaru gave a joyful bark. Naruto smiled and said, it's pretty hot out today, isn't it? Are you kidding? Kiba asked with a furrowed brow. It's cold, Kami. How many layers are you wearing to mistake this temperature for hot? He smiled. Stepping forward, Naruto said, really? Weird, I must have gotten warmer when I ran. Akamaru complained with a furrowed brow once more. Kiba sniffed Naruto and said, you smell weird. Fixed Naruto's gaze. Well, not bad, I guess, just weird. Naruto stepped back from the shinobi, then turned to face Tsunade, saying, thanks, Kiba, I'm gonna go see Tsunade about my report. After shaking his head to get rid of the odd conversation, the yellow-haired ninja accelerated the pace. At last he reached the office of the Hokage. Yo, Tsunade Baba. He waved, smiling. Where have you been? She demanded passionately. She placed her hands on her hips, her huge chest swaying as she said, do you know that every time you come back late you had us worrying for however long you were supposed to be here? Geez, Granny. Relax, I got held up a bit, what's it matter? You said this be my last mission for a long time? Just finish the report and turn it in to me, alright? Then you can go do whatever. The woman sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose in frustration. She then turned to sit at her desk, leaving him to return to his apartment. Naruto actually completed the report by the end of the day, as he had intended. However, a few too many distractions were present. Upon arriving home, he immediately collapsed onto his couch. He felt much better once he was inside, which surprised him. Taking a shower was a deliberate choice. He snatched up a towel and hurried to the restroom. The feeling of clean water on his skin was pleasant. He stood there for a while, letting it wash the dirt that had accumulated during the mission away from his face. He felt strange after going 2 days without taking a shower. He eventually emerged from the stall, relieved to have access to hot water. The toothbrush comes next. He hadn't brushed his teeth in a long time. Surprisingly, he enjoyed the feeling of cleanliness afterward, despite the unpleasant taste of artificial mint that concealed chemicals. Something irritated him when he began brushing his back teeth. His toothbrush kept bouncing off his canines. He was aware that the Kyuubi inside of him caused them to lengthen on occasion, but they usually didn't when he was doing monotonous chores like brushing his teeth. He wiped some of the fog from the mirror with his hand and gazed. The length of his canines had increased by half an inch. Still looking anxiously at the long teeth in the mirror, Naruto felt them with his tongue. They should be normal, or nearly normal, or, he paused. They shouldn't be this long. Did he change in any other ways? His feelings remained unchanged. He used the mirror to look closely at the area where the stranger had punctured his neck. Since there weren't many other possibilities, he figured this was the most likely explanation. He kept his gaze fixed on his teeth. Could this be related to Kiba's statement that he felt extremely warm even though it was cold outside today? He chose to bite his thumb to see how sharp his new fangs were. He needed to bite with far less force than when he summoned toads. A fairly deep cut was made by light pressure. Any more and the tooth might have met the bone. He kept trying to understand this while staring at his thumb when, to his complete surprise, the wound just closed up. It felt like there was an invisible zipper on the freshly closed cut. It wasn't even like healing. The Kyuubi seal couldn't be the cause of this. It would have appeared sooner if it was. He had no trouble thinking the standard thought. Tell Tsunade. Tell Sakura. Tell someone. He started to change in his bedroom but stopped. What would happen if they chose to keep him here for monitoring? There were still activities outside the village, and Sasuke was still out there. He couldn't remain under quarantine here. In addition to that, he sensed that this was just the beginning of the changes he would undergo. He was aware that he would once more be closely watched if something occurred that made him even more dangerous than he already was. After inhaling deeply, Naruto returned to the mirror. He fixed his intense gaze on his fangs, which had not been so noticeable in a long time and had no justification for their current state. They had to be hidden somehow. Naruto kept looking anxiously into a spoon to see his reflection. He was out of milk and ramen, so he was sitting at his small kitchen table now, looming over the papers he was using to record his mission and a half-eaten bowl of dry cereal. For the moment, his teeth appeared normal. Restoring them to their initial state had taken an hour. He discovered that his tendency to ungrow decreased with increasing frustration and anxiety. They miraculously concluded that he was sufficiently calm to continue without fangs after he eventually made the decision to calm down and boil some water for tea. The tea had been delicious. He could smell the dried leaves as soon as he opened the jar that Iruka had given him, and he claimed that they tasted better than the ordinary teabag type he typically purchased in the small jar. He detected the scents of rosemary, mint, and sage. He thought his improved sense of smell was just another change, like the teeth and healing oddity, but to his surprise, the shriveled, shrunken leaves hadn't developed into full-flowered plants while he was away. When he tasted those same herbs in the brew, the aroma had indeed come from the tea leaves. His stomach eventually started to growl. It seemed that the tea had warned it that there was food nearby. Not surprisingly, aside from some baking soda, his refrigerator was almost completely empty. He also seemed to have emptied his pantry, leaving only an opened box of cereal, some canned fish, and some ketchup that had not been used. Unfortunately, he hadn't sealed the dry breakfast food to prevent moisture from building up inside, and as a result, it had lost its original crunch and was reduced to a half-assed crumble. The only thing he needed to douse it in was water and maybe tea, but he would have preferred it soggy if it was already this way. That left him with a spoon that he had to wash before using, and a bowl of cereal that wasn't so good. Swell, it was an accomplishment to eat half of it. With a sigh, he combed through his hair. After I finish this, I'll go get some ramen. He thought now that he could smell every ingredient. He hurriedly finished the rest of the report. Anticipating the ramen, which would undoubtedly taste better, he decided to drop off the report first, then go out to eat, so he finally put down his pen and went to put on a jacket. Ino approached him with her long, glossy ponytail swinging behind her and said, "Hello, Naruto. How'd the mission go?" "Not bad," he smiled in return. Even though Ino wasn't his favorite person to talk to, it couldn't hurt to be courteous. "How was Konoha while I was gone?" She shrugged and said, "Same as always." Then her scent was blowing right in his face from a breeze behind her. Ino had a feminine scent: laundry detergent, shampoo, conditioner, and, above all, the scent of perfume. The smell wasn't unpleasant, but it was definitely overpowering. He was relieved that they weren't so close that he felt he should give her a hug. He could faint. "That's good. I'm going to Tsunade's to give her my report. Do you know if—" Naruto blinked and said, "Sakura's coming this way." In fact, he was going to inquire as to whether the Hokage was in her office, but he assumed that he would have eventually inquired as to Sakura's location. The pink-haired Kunoichi jogged up to them and exclaimed, "Naruto, you were late." Naruto almost choked. Although it wasn't as powerful as the one that had carried Ino's scent, the new breeze was still helpful. Sakura didn't smell like Ino at all. It smelled like a hospital, complete with the uncomfortably hygienic odor. The odors of different medications and repulsive herbs had seeped into her skin, hair, and clothing. Her shampoo, which was unpleasant in and of itself, was the only other scent he could detect. He had never been particularly impressed by the scent of artificial cherries. "Yeah, I'm sorry. I had better get this to Tsunade. It was great talking to you." Though he broke down, he had no desire to discover the taste that accompanied that odor. Without even looking back, he dashed to the Hokage's office. Oh no, his girl was supposed to smell amazing, right? How often had he thought about sticking his nose in her hair? He reasoned, not while she's still a medical nin. However, he later recognized that as unjust. In addition to the fact that Sakura couldn't control her odor, they needed her as a medical nin. But Ino can, he reasoned. Why can't she? Ino wears perfume. He let out a sigh. Fantastic. He was beginning to believe that his crush needed the Vanity Queen's advice because of all these purportedly beneficial changes. What a mess. After giving Tsunade the report, he took a leisurely stroll down to Ichiraku's for dinner. It was evening now. Lamps were being lit. The sky was turning a deep indigo. On his way to the ramen shop, he had the strange sensation that he was being watched. It felt weird to be watched like this, even though he knew that whoever it was meant no harm. A cheeky grin appeared on his lips. He turned and started walking straight toward whoever was watching him without making any noise. As he got closer to the corner of the building in question, a fast-moving lock of dark hair disappeared from view. "Hinata-chan?" he asked. His brow knit. The girl emerged from her hiding place and said, Hi, and Naruto." "What's up?" he asked, tilting his head to look at her. "You've been following me, but why?" The question that was not spoken became prevalent and dominated the atmosphere. The Hyuga's face flushed greatly. "Well, Naruto tried to figure out the answer himself. You want to eat too, right?" he asked. "The lamps are probably the reason her hair is so shiny." Unable to come up with a reason for her stalking, the girl uttered the pitiful words, "I don't know." "Well, that's okay. You can come to eat with me, and then if you're hungry, you can order." Naruto laughed. "You didn't really have to follow me. You know, y'all could have just asked. I won't say no to dinner with a friend." "Okay," she uttered timidly. Naruto asked her, "So, how've you been?" as he resumed his walk. Her index finger curved over her thumb and settled just beneath her lower lip, giving the impression that it was fuller than it actually was. "I've been fine. How was your mission?" she asked. Naruto paused. "Okay, I guess so. How?" She smelled different than Sakura and Ino. She clearly had a stronger scent than Sakura, and he thought it was slightly better than Ino's. The smell of Ino had been pleasant, even though it was clear that all of it had come from metal or plastic bottles. Hinata's was fresher and more organic. He detected the scent of lavender and lilies, or perhaps lilac, as well as water. Like a combination of waterfalls and rain, it made him feel clean and happy, refreshed, and like he was taking a bath in a clear stream. She raised her hands to her face in fear and questioned, "What is it?" He replied quickly, Nothing. I just, thought I saw something." He smiled and shook his head. "How are things going with Kiba and Shino?" he asked. Wishing she had something more intriguing to say, she replied, "They're fine." Naruto let out a sigh. It was going to be an awkward walk if they didn't start talking right away. Hinata blushed when she was called that. "Here we go, one for you and one for the pretty girl." "Ichiraku's ramen is the best." Naruto smiled, laughing. The man said, "I'm glad you think so." Naruto was correct. Using his new senses to eat ramen was genuinely divine. Before he had even brought the delicious food to his face, he could already smell it. With a hint of fear, Hinata asked him, do you like chocolate? What? He asked her, uncertain if he had heard correctly. I mean, I made some, and I thought you'd like some to eat, but they're not sweet, because I didn't use too much sugar, since the cook didn't want me to waste her ingredients. Hinata stopped and blushed. Sure. Naruto smiled, relieved that she had finally said something. Unsweetened chocolate would be great because I don't really like sweet things anyway. Hinata nervously twiddled her index fingers in front of her steaming bowl of ramen, saying, oh. Naruto sighed in his mind. Despite her kindness, Hinata-chan didn't seem to enjoy speaking with him. After pointing to her noodles, he asked, are you gonna finish that? She slid them to him without saying a word. So, I guess I'll see you tomorrow, Hinata-chan. Huh? He questioned whether she had actually been listening to him or if she had been imagining that she was somewhere else. The chocolates, Naruto replied, but that's alright, you don't have to give them to me if you don't want to. No, I do, I'll bring them by your house around 6? That early? He asked, raising his eyebrows. Did she have an allergy to air or something? No, later in the day. I'm busy from morning to F5. Her face continued to flush. Okay, then I'll see you then, Hinata-chan. Good night. Good night. The two parted with ease. He had stayed up until 1 p.m. Was that even possible? As he hopped around on one leg, attempting to put on his pants, he wondered. Once more, he was forced to eat the chewy cereal. Since he had forgotten to purchase any good food, it was easier to finish off what was left in the sticky bowl on the table and toss it into the sink than to search through his pantry for the fish he'd seen earlier. But doing the dishes would require a fork, which would require him to purchase a sponge. Cleaning his supplies was the one task he always detested. After these missions were over, polishing and cleaning them, can't he just give them to someone who enjoyed doing these things? Geez. He took care of the dishes in his sink. Just as ninjas had to maintain the cleanliness of their weapons, the rulebook contained no information regarding dishes. Additionally, there were bandages this time. The only issues were a minor cut and an injured ankle that required bandaging, but even those needed to be cleaned to prevent infection the next time. Sheesh. He opened his sack and yanked the offending items out without fanfare, fearing the foul stench of unwashed bloody cloth. He did not want to smell his filthy bandages if he could smell Sakura from a foot away. Unfortunately, he was unable to hold his breath indefinitely. He had to take a breath just as he had gotten them wet enough to begin soaping them. He used his nose to do it. A delightful scent drifted into his nostrils. His fangs had grown back, too. According to an irksome poking sensation, he snarled with annoyance and he refused to acknowledge it. Pleasure. He had never smelled anything as good as this one. It had an almost edible smell. Naruto's gaze expanded. Bandages. Bandages that are 2 days old, bloody, and filthy. The very thought of them was repulsive. Why did he think they had a pleasant scent? Why didn't this irritate his nose if the hospital odor was too strong for him? Ignore that. The odor was beginning to wane. Naruto scrubbed vigorously, using soap to remove the stains, relieved that the faint mist that had been building in his head since he had first smelled the cloth was dissipating. He hung them up to dry on the door of his shower and departed, shaking his head bewildered, once the items were white or clean. The foolish fog had not yet completely dissipated. He was itching to bite, claw, and run around to clear his head. He might have slapped himself a few times before pacing back into the bathroom to wash his face in cold water. Glancing in the mirror, he grabbed 2 handfuls of cold water and froze. His gaze, they had changed from their typical blue to a silvery, cerulean color. He looked dreadful, especially with the fangs and the positively feral look on his face caused by the fog in his head. Not human. What the hell was going on? Shit. Naruto scowled at the other people in the room. He let out a growl that sounded so good that he repeated it. Then he let out a sigh. Now he was definitely behaving like a beast. Well, what was it he knew? His fangs grew out when he was anxious or stressed. He chose to ignore the fact that he had begun to refer to them as his. He experienced a strange fog in his head when he smelled bandages, which caused his eyes to change color and made him agitated. He had a much stronger scent than before. He could also recover quickly. Well, he could probably control it now that he knew what to anticipate. Just keep in mind to hold his breath around bandages and Sakura, to hide any cuts he received from the others, and to calm down when it felt like his teeth would erupt. All right, he said, gazing steadily at his reflection. When is Hinata expected to arrive? Hinata muttered, hi, Naruto, with shyness. Her air allergies seemed to have subsided today, as evidenced by the slight flush that was dusting her cheeks, though it got worse when he invited her over for tea. What was he meant to do, then? He wasn't such a jerk as to send her away with the candy. With a halting, "Thank you," Hinata crossed the threshold with ease. Do you mind staying in the kitchen for now? There's a mess in my living room and I don't want you to see it, Naruto replied. She gave a hasty nod and walked quickly to the spot where he had just arranged the tea supplies, which included 2 broken cups, a kettle, a teapot, and leaves. She was cleaning the dirty dishes in his sink when Naruto got back, which surprised him. Hinata jumped and her hand slipped on the edge of a big knife, the only one he had, causing a few drops of her blood to fall into the soapy silverware below. You don't have to do that. Naruto's fangs sank effortlessly, and his eyes slid halfway closed. The fog started to slink through his head, but it wasn't ramen. Hinata was his friend, although she wasn't edible. Kami. This smell was far superior to the previous one emanating from the bandages. The bandages. Don't move, Naruto, who was still torn between his human and beast forms, said sternly. In an instant, he returned with brand new, unused cloth strips for Hinata's hand. His bathroom was filled with a tainted monstrosity that he would never allow her to see since his first mission. He had been using the same ones, cleaning, repairing, and so on, saving these only for emergencies. He quickly came up with an impromptu plan. Using 2 strips to stop the steady flow coming from her hand and tucking them behind him, he carefully wrapped the remainder around her broken skin, making sure she couldn't see any of his peculiar features. After wiping her hand with the bloody strips of cloth, he walked away without turning around. Staring at the objects in his hand, Naruto locked himself in the bathroom. Blood. Was that what had made him react that way? However, why did it seem that way? Without pausing to think, Naruto folded the cloth, gently placed it on his tongue, and then sealed his mouth, pressing the moisture from the bandage. His mouth was covered in a delicious, creamy liquid that tasted like honey. His senses were sharper than ever. As he groaned, he could smell the chemicals used to clean it on his bathroom counter, the slight smell of the paint that had been there for so long, and the other bandage that was left on the white tile next to the sink. Before long, the taste had been forced from the fabric, and he snarled as he removed it from his lips and eagerly replaced it with the next bandage. His senses were ablaze once more. He could see, smell, feel, and hear everything, including the terrified heartbeat of a certain Hyuga Hinata. What a waste! He felt completely in control and quickly sucked out the fluid, taking less time than he had the first time he used this bandage. He then moved easily into his kitchen. Naruto calmly explained to the unsteady Hyuga, Gomen, Hinata-chan, I was worried you might injure yourself, bleeding so much from a cut on your hand. It's all right. However, it was clear that his extreme behavior was still confusing her. Naruto swore to himself then, because of what he had just done and the way he was handling the situation. He also added some self-loathing. The sight of the stack of dishes made him smile, relieved that he could find some common ground. Here, I'll wash, you dry. Hinata gave a quick nod and, as if by magic, produced a fresh dish towel, which she promptly dried and put away. The awkward silence made Naruto wince inwardly. So, Hinata, where were you today? She glanced at him, a little perplexed. Well, yesterday you said you were busy. Never mind, if you don't want to share. Well, I was shopping for groceries. There was a sale at the store and I wanted to purchase some things. Naruto asked, don't you live with your family? With a head tilt. Why yes, but I enjoy preparing food very much and the cook lets me use her kitchen sometimes, Hinata said, blushing at the inquisitive expression on his face. With a nod, Naruto said, that's cool, hi. A hesitant silence fell between the two of them. So, is there any kind of food you like, in particular? Replied Naruto. I like rice. He gave her an odd look. She was blushing. Well, you can use it in a lot of different ways. Everyone can enjoy it because it's so easy to adapt to any recipe. Naruto replied, I suppose that is a good thing, but what kind of rice do you like? Oh, onigiri. I like picnics. That's cool. Too soon. The dishes were finished, and their awkward silence persisted since neither of them could pretend they were too preoccupied with drying or rinsing to talk. While keeping himself occupied by turning on the kettle and choosing 2 cups for them to use, Naruto invited her to sit at the table. He cubed the chocolate with the knife Hinata had previously cut herself on and slid it onto a plate. He stacked the chocolate squares in various piles to amuse himself while the water boiled. When he realized Hinata was observing him, he stopped and blushed. Apologizing, she stammered an apology for staring, and he sighed that there was really nothing wrong. The whole thing was made more annoying by the feeling that there was an electric current flowing through the space between him and Hinata. He would gladly be the first to speak, if only he knew a conversation that wouldn't end in a dead end. It was clear that they both wanted the other to say something. He was eager to finish this as soon as possible, so he wasted no time in getting to the stove. When the kettle whistled, it was a plan. We eat chocolate, drink tea, and I compliment her before she leaves. Unwilling to burn himself or his guests, Naruto carefully placed the teapot on the table and filled it with a generous amount of tea for each of them. Then, anticipating a sugar overload or a bitter aftertaste, he snatched a piece of chocolate for himself and shoved it into his mouth. The chocolate was fine. Much to his surprise, it was richer than anything else, with cocoa as the main flavor. Don't think about that now. The texture was like what he had felt with Hinata's blood. At Hinata's courteous, "I know you're lying so I won't feel bad" smile, Naruto exclaimed. "These are great. No, really, they're the best chocolates I've tasted." Her smile lost some of its professionalism as she looked down at her tea. Her cheeks flushed again. By this point, her brain must be shutting down from oxygen deprivation. "I don't like really sweet things, remember?" she said. After that, the quiet became more relaxed, and Naruto felt satisfied with simply sitting and drinking tea for a while. So when she raised her voice, he was taken aback. "Naruto?" Hinata's blush darkened at the instant, and perhaps aggressive attention she received, but she refused to back down. "I've noticed that you don't really have a lot of the necessary utensils and things, and I was wondering if you'd like some help shopping for more." He was momentarily stunned by the shock of her audacity. He had no intention of purchasing any new plates or anything, but after hearing her mention it, he should definitely get some more. This is especially true because he liked to leave anything unclean in the sink until he had no choice but to clean it. Furthermore, it was astonishing that he and Hinata had been able to scrape the old food off of the dishes at all, given that the filthy ones they had previously cleaned had been there for over 3 days. He looked down at his plate, embarrassed, even more so when he noticed the chipped item that Hinata's homemade dessert was on. Of course she'd think you were going to buy new ones. Any normal person would, after seeing the crap that was on the ones you have now. "Oh, Cammy, I made her clean them, too. You impolite slob," he scolded himself. "Be courteous and accept her invitation." "Yeah, that'd be great." He was thinking, "Actually, could you also help me with buying groceries? I mean, you're such an excellent cook, and I'm bad at choosing food from the store." "How do you choose what to buy now?" she asked with a slight frown. He said, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. "I usually just get instant ramen." "Naruto-san. You won't be able to function properly if you only eat ramen." He stared at her in disbelief for a few moments before he burst out laughing when he said this. "You're right, Hinata-chan, so, could you help me, then?" "Hi," she said, turning to face her index fingers, which were tapping nervously together as her last cry had sapped all of her courage. His fingers tickled and left a trail of goosebumps as they moved up her side, a little disappointed that she didn't sigh or moan in appreciation of his efforts. He smiled at her body's reaction to his attentions. His smile vanished as his gaze locked with hers. He was almost alarmed by the serious look on her face, but he forced himself not to consider the possibility that she didn't want this when she eagerly replied. All doubts vanished and he kissed without hesitation in order to avoid being overcome by her blood once more. His mouth moved down, licking her chin before cautiously biting her throat. She made a mewling sound. Her fingernails scraped his back when she realized that her attempt to mark him instantly healed. He smirked at her frustration. He moved lower, biting harder, leaving a mark on her hip, side, and breast, as well as on her throat. She released a tremulous sigh that lingered in the air before dissipating before returning to his previous position, above her, like a predator rather than a lover. He allowed himself to breathe in her scent while pressing his face against her pale stomach. The faint dampness at the corners of her eyes caused his eyebrows to furrow. "You'll let me know if I hurt you, right?" He looked frantically for the answer as she shook her head. "No, even if it hurts, I don't want you to stop." The heated tryst became more affectionate as he leaned down to gently press his lips against hers and smiled at her. A tiny, worried smile with a doubtful look. She asked, "Yours?" He buried his face in her hair and nodded. "Mine." He exhaled deeply. Naruto gave his reflection a scowl. The fact that he was dreaming about Hinata in that way, of all people, was extremely annoying, in addition to the fact that he was becoming a pervert. "You've been nothing but kind to her, and now you're considering getting into her pants?" "Mine," he said, his voice echoing in his mind. What the devil? In no way was Hinata his. There was absolutely no reason for him to fantasize about Hinata. He looked bitterly at himself again. "You're a pervert." The day turned out to be sunny once more, but it felt much colder than the two before. Naruto was a bit early, but he waited at the entrance to Ichiraku's as he and Hinata had decided. When Hinata approached him carrying a bag that was undoubtedly for their food, his fear of having to wait there for too long vanished. She said, "Hello, sorry. Am I early?" "Yes, but I'm early, too, so it's no problem," he said. "Well, shall we get going?" Sure." They both stood for a few more seconds, though he had no idea where they were headed. Hinata seemed to want him to take the lead. Would they purchase food or dishes first? His hair ruffled in a slight breeze on his face, it felt welcome and cool. The girl blushed and obeyed his command, moving ahead of him and heading for the market. Lead the way, Hinata. Thus, they planned to purchase groceries all right. He smelled Hinata's scent as the breeze began to blow again. His teeth stabbed into his lower lip as he froze. Did he smell blood there? The blood of Hinata? She appeared fine, so why would she be bleeding? Naruto's expression went blank. No, was that what she was? Oh, no, he was also going to be around her all day. Shush tea. Hinata looked up from the bananas and turned to Naruto. Remember that when they're green, that means they're newer than the other ones, so they'll last longer, although it would be best to wait and not eat them until they turn yellow. They taste better that way. He was frowning in what appeared to be concentration as he asked, "Yuji got all that, Naruto-kun? I can write it down for you, if you like." No, I'm fine." "Whoa, those are expensive," he exclaimed, staring at the fruit display's overhead price. Hinata clarified, "Most fruits are shipped here from far away, so they cost a lot." "Well, I guess that makes sense. Do you mind if we just don't buy any, then?" After Hinata shook her head, they continued. Naruto grimaced after she turned away. Oh no, ignoring her scent was becoming more difficult otherwise. He would have been jumping on her right now and trying to bite her for the delicious smelling blood, so he was thankful for the smell of all these foods. He cleared his face as Hinata approached him and asked, "Naruto, are you sure you're alright?" He fisted his hands as her scent filled his nostrils. "Do you have a fever?" Her hand touched his forehead. "Naruto-kun, you're really hot. I think you should go home. I'll buy the stuff you need." Did he have a fever? He felt warm, but he was certain that it was due to her close proximity. It was becoming difficult for Cammy to resist biting her and to find the source of that amazing scent. He staggered off. Thanks. Hinata, I'll leave the door unlocked so that you can get in. Nay? Otherwise I'll forget about the food and step on it when I leave the house. What was he up to? Was she being summoned to his apartment? There, what if he lost it? There would be no one else to stop him. Okay, Naruto-kun, I'll bring ramen. He took off running. His head cleared when he got home, but his teeth remained. Why was he unable to control himself? Could he have been more overt? However, after he had already tasted Hinata's blood once and with her so close, Naruto started to pant as the previous mist rolled in. His vision was becoming blurry. Hinata's voice replayed in his mind, "And Naruto-kun? It's me. I forgot to ask you if you had any noodles or if I should buy some." Any rational thought was obscured by the fog in his head as he ran to the door intoxicated. He put his arms around the girl and breathed in her scent, asking, "Naruto? Are you alright? What are you doing? And Naruto? What?" He took a bite out of her. Everything. Naruto was surrounded by everything. He could feel the carpet beneath his feet. He could smell the groceries in the bags a foot away, the dust on his shelves, and the fresh, rainy scent Hinata always carried. His mouth was filled with a hot, salty liquid that came in ebb and flow fashion, calming his throat before vanishing and coating his stomach like rich milk. It was divine. Whimpers and what might have been crying occasionally accompanied the soft, feminine pants that were breathed into Naruto's ear. His grip on Hinata remained firm. He continued to drink, enjoying her flavor and sensing life, death, and light all around him. He could also smell her confusion and fear now. There was hardly any struggle. He could hear her breathing less frequently now. Her sighs and whimpers were no longer audible to humans. Hinata had passed away. No, what was he doing? Exactly. Naruto threw her off him in shock and disgust, staring helplessly at her paler than normal form on his carpet. "Hinata," he said, bending down to pick her up and carrying her to his couch while looking for a sign of breath. Perhaps a pulse. Please don't be dead." I wasn't thinking. Come on. You've gotta. He gulped. He frantically felt for the sensation of blood flowing through her body by feeling her wrists and neck without considering the gender difference. He opened her shirt and lowered his ear to her chest after hearing a hissed apology. There, a beating heart. She was still living. Thank you. Cammy, unaware that the only person who might have seen him was unconscious and well past half dead, he bit his tongue, lip, cheeks, and anything else in an attempt to keep salt water from dripping from his eyes after nearly killing his friend. He picked her up once more and jumped out the window, racing toward the Hyuga complex, saying, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Though she occasionally managed to stay awake to swallow the small portions of cool soups that were spooned into her mouth, Hinata slipped in and out of consciousness. She was unable to move or even drink water because she knew she had a fever. The 3 blankets that healers had allowed helpers to wrap her in did nothing to stop her shivers, and she was always cold. Unfortunately, she could also see that she was always drenched in dry perspiration when she was awake. Every time she woke up, Hinata felt as though she had just completed a marathon, and she wondered what she was doing when she wasn't awake. She was found to have some kind of illness, but Hinata didn't understand why they believed that. Particularly where Naruto bit her. Her neck hurt, only the sensation of blood leaving her and the accompanying invasive, sucking feeling remained in her memory. It wasn't as though she hadn't had fantasies about her crush. And yes, some of them had involved love bites, but that wasn't pleasant in any way. She coughed and winced when it felt like a poke wound. She moved her hand and ran her fingers along the spot where he had done it, but it took some effort. Nothing was there, presuming she was simply not thinking straight. She didn't bother to feel for it again. She needed to sleep, and worrying about Naruto's actions wasn't making her feel better. Hinata pulled the blankets closer to her as she leaned her head back. The air conditioner is terrible. Hinata, Naruto? The girl asked, spinning around in an attempt to locate the speaker. Strong arms encircled her, holding her to a firm chest, saying, "Come here. Hinata-chan. Let me taste you again, Hinata." She struggled to separate herself from him, saying, "What? No, that wasn't it. It hurt." She stopped. "I'm sorry, Hinata-chan," she said, as warm lips gently touched her jaw before moving downward and nipping at the spot where her pulse twitched and then upward to plant a fiery kiss on her cheek. Hinata exclaimed, feeling her perspiration on her cheeks. That's not okay. Naruto, stop. It hurts when you bite." Now that she was facing him in his arms, Naruto turned her around and planted a kiss on the hollow beneath her throat. "It hurts when I don't. Do you know what happened to me, Hinata? Do you know why I did that?" "And no." He licked the tears from her cheeks and said, "Won't you look at me? What if I told you I couldn't help it? Are you mad at me, Hinata?" She moaned as her arms wrapped around his waist and her face turned up so he could put his mouth over hers. "You like me, Hinata? You're not mad at me?" "No, I'm not." "You're confused, not scared." "No." Naruto leaned down once more and kissed her face and throat, taking deep breaths as he got closer to her jugular. "Do you mind when I do this?" he asked. "And no." She shook her head in an attempt to clear the air. Was this a dream? Anticipating the intense kiss that ensued, she froze when Naruto planted a kiss on her chin. "This isn't possible. Don't be afraid of me, Hinata. I like you, too." Their lips once more touched, and she felt safe and in control with him. She was secure. Kami, after opening her eyes, Hinata spent several minutes staring at the ceiling as she tried to process what had happened. A dream. She was much more at ease with Naruto now, but she didn't think it meant anything. For what reason did he do that? For him, it couldn't be typical. Why her, too? Sakura, why not? Wouldn't he be happier with the girl he liked if it was an act of lust? As her subconscious seemed to believe. This was just too much. She was merely attempting to get nearer to him. Not really. It wasn't even a date when he asked her to accompany him grocery shopping. What in the world was happening? "Hey, no one's really seen you since you came back from your mission. It's been 2 days. You're not normally this quiet. Is everything alright? Are you ill?" Sakura asked, knocking on his apartment door and noticing a faint sound of movement on the other side. "Go away." He sounded wretched. "Kami, what's going on? Why haven't you left your apartment for 2 days?" It's none of your business." "What the hell's that supposed to mean?" "When the great orange energy ball coops himself up in his house for 2 days, it's a reason to worry." The girl with the pink hair frowned, but no one answered, not even a "hey." Indignant at her shout, there was undoubtedly a problem with him. "Naruto, let me in right now or I'll break down your apartment door." There was a pause followed by the sound of a lock turning. Sakura scowled as she opened the door, anticipating an empty apartment with a single window open. Unexpectedly, Naruto didn't even bother to hide when she entered. He was directly in front of her. He looked fantastic for a recluse. He exuded a certain glow that gave the impression that he was in the best possible health, but his expression told a different tale. His expression was strange and reserved. It was more introspective than apathetic. Something else seemed to be on his mind, and whatever it was not a pleasant one. "Come in," he said boringly. He didn't sound like the animated person she was used to hearing. She thought, irritated, and he sure isn't very enthusiastic for someone whose crush is visiting him. Her face also changed to one of fear as soon as she entered. What took place here? One wall had a crack in it, as though she had punched it with an unfriendly, chakra-enhanced blow. A cushion was missing from Naruto's couch. Upon closer examination, she discovered that the cushion had been replaced by a ripped lump of foamy stuffing that was now resting in the corner. In addition, there were other, less obvious mess in the room, like a chair with half of its leg missing, a broken picture frame, etc. She spun around, half expecting her teammate to attack her, and asked, "Did you do all this? Why?" Without further explanation, the blonde shrugged and said, "May as well live in a hole if I'm gonna act like a monster." He asked her to sit down and promised to bring some food over shortly. Quickly, turned out to be half a second because he was back in front of her before she could blink. carrying a plate of chocolates? The hell? Sakura smiled and thanked him as she hesitantly took one. Yuck, why aren't these sweet? The friend took one for himself and seemed to enjoy it. Hinata made them. She didn't have a lot of sugar, or something like that, he explained. She questioned, so you don't like sweet things? That was fascinating. She rarely allowed herself to indulge them, but she loved them if you ate junk food when you did eat. Then dieting was kind of pointless as a result. She mostly ate salads and low-calorie soups, occasionally treating herself to a small caramel. Nah, too silent. Sakura rubbed the back of her neck and continued. So, I heard Hinata got sick. She's been out of it for, wow, almost 2 days. Weird. Huh? Usually Naruto was the one who spoke, so she wasn't used to this. No one can figure out why, although people have been talking about blood loss being the case. Weird thing is, she doesn't have any wounds. What? Why was he staring at her in that way? He nearly uttered the words urgently. Will she be okay? Is it permanent? He kept staring at her intently, waiting for a response, and she gave in to the temptation to turn to something more comfortable. Why? Do you like her? He asked. I heard you guys went on a date a while ago. The boy mumbled. She was helping me with shopping. Shikamaru saw you. She realized. Hey, did something happen? Is that why you won't come out of your apartment now? She got to her feet, throwing her fists to her hips and wearing a fake look of rage. What did you do, Naruto? She asked. The boy's face was pained as he covered his mouth in response. Hey, what's wrong? Don't tell me something actually, Sakura said, sitting down and placing a hand on his shoulder, not anticipating this. With a broken man's appearance, Naruto ground out, what I did was horrible, and then put both of his hands on his head. I can't even imagine, he said, turning to face her with terrified eyes. She almost died. Sakura, I couldn't feel her pulse. She wasn't. Sakura said gravely, Naruto, tell me what happened. A long pause ensued. He watched the floor with dead eyes for a few long moments without looking at her. Then he did, beginning with the encounter on his way back from the trip. Everything came out. He even bit his thumb once more to demonstrate to her how he recovered, as evidenced by his changing eye color and fangs. Sakura absorbed all of this in silence, occasionally posing queries to which he had no response and providing her own justifications. He appeared to calm down as he told her, returning to later passages with greater detail and less resentment toward himself. When he reached the part where Hinata entered, he fell silent and began to hesitantly describe the day she entered his apartment before abruptly stopping when he had to explain what he had done. Sakura calmly questioned, Naruto, did you bite her? To put it mildly, the entire story was concerning. It appeared that their shy, affectionate friend had become the object of her friend's literal thirst for blood. He nodded quickly and covered his mouth once more. Sakura turned his head to face him and sighed. She thought absently that this might be interpreted as a romantic gesture, but she dismissed that thought, scolding herself for thinking about trivial matters at such a moment. You have to tell her. It appeared as though she had just told him that she intended to kill everyone in Konoha. Sakura covered her mouth and reprimanded herself once more for revealing Hinata's poorly kept secret. She needs to know why you did it. She is absolutely the person who most needs to know. Naruto, can you imagine what it's like to be her right now? Her crush almost ended her life via the ultimate hickey. There was a beat of silence. A tiny vein formed on Sakura's forehead, alerting Naruto that it was probably time to let go of his pink-haired friend's confession and return his attention to the subject at hand. Her what? Naruto's gaze was now more shocked. He was completely taken aback by what she had just said. I'm her. She's had a crush on me. For how long? I can't go up to her after what I did. It isn't even, I mean, she might not even listen to me, regardless of that. When she unintentionally pushed her headband off of her head entirely, Sakura sighed and combed through her hair in frustration. Okay, then I'll tell her. She deserves to know, and your lack of a backbone isn't gonna stop her from doing so, she said, pausing to readjust it before glaring at the other ninja. You'll tell her the whole thing? I mean, you'll explain why, Naruto said, looking both relieved and somewhat frightened. Yeah, I will, but you have to get yourself together in the meantime. As they surveyed their surroundings, Naruto's remarks encapsulated their thoughts about his apartment. Oh, damn, walking was becoming easier now. Uncomfortable in her bulky robe, Hinata removed it in the hopes that no one would notice her in her shorts and t-shirt and reinforce their negative perception of her. The Hyuga heiress, both outside and in her skimpy pajamas. If the elders discovered how inappropriate she was being, they would all have heart attacks. She looked at the moon, ignoring the chill of the breeze because there were no clouds. It was about 3/4 of the way full and extremely bright. Once more, she found herself thinking about Naruto and his behavior. You must forgive him. With wide, pale eyes, Hinata spun around. There was no one out here, She was certain before throwing away her robe. She had made sure. Seeing no one, she reached uneasily for a kunai she had stored in her robe, pulling the garment on and securing it tightly around herself at the same time. Who's there? The words, he couldn't control himself, you see instincts, and all that they made him do it, had a dejected tone, similar to how her sister spoke to her additionally, the way he said it. She was taken aback by the steady tone of her voice, but she chose not to show it. What do you know about what he did? I haven't told anyone. In the moonlight, her hard eyes shone dangerously. I can tell why it was you. You smell so natural, unlike the other girls in this village. She turned to try to see her conversation partner after hearing a longing sigh behind her. When that didn't work, she used the Byakugan, but that didn't help either. Hinata was becoming anxious and said, answer my question, why was this man invisible to her? Let me help you, a spooky figure said as it emerged from the darkness. He had very pale skin, long dark hair, and expressive green eyes that gleamed more in the dark than any color should. Long, inhuman fangs protruded from his mouth when he smiled, and Hinata had to fight the urge to gasp. Don't bother, I can hear your thoughts. Your fear is evident. She said in a whisper. What are you? A vampire, and I believe you've already had an encounter with my kind, he said, pointing to her neck as his smile grew wider. Naruto, he gestured her to her own porch, where she cautiously sat down, and said, please, let us talk. After joining her, he started what turned out to be a lengthy explanation about his kind. They talked for half of the night. Hinata would frequently make a remark or pose a question that compelled him to go deeper into the topic. Reciting historical events that he had studied as a child, he started to make his point about her after he had finally provided her with enough details for her to be content with her current understanding of Naruto. His tone was solemn. Hinata realized this was a necessary conversation. He owes you a favor. Now that he's nearly killed you, I need you to ask him to meet with me. My father won't let me out of the house. I'm already on house arrest because I nearly got myself killed, she was arguing. Friends visit you, don't they? Tell the next person who sees you that you need to speak with him. He'll come, or, at least, he should. I haven't exactly been watching him. I assume he'll be honorable enough to see the woman whose life he almost ended. Being called a woman made her face flush. It was a minor thing, but it was a greater compliment than she was used to. I'll ask. Good, there's an alley behind his apartment building. Tell him I'll meet him there. Hinata turned to re-enter her home, still reflecting on the events of the previous few days. And, can I make a suggestion? She asked the unidentified vampire who was staring at her with amusement. Don't sit too close to him when he visits. One taste of your blood will only make him more sensitive to it the next time around. He hasn't had anyone else's, as far as I know, and yours does have, as I've said, a rather delicious aroma. Hinata returned inside without saying anything more, her face burning. The vampire had heard her thoughts on his final sentence. As evidenced by a loud laugh, without a doubt, it was time to sleep. Hinata-sama, Sakura-san is here to see you. Hinata sat up a little more straight and shifted her blankets nervously, saying, all right, thank you. This was advantageous because Sakura, his teammate, wouldn't have to make a special effort to speak with Naruto. Inhale. Hi, Hinata-chan, I really need to talk to you. It's about Naruto. He was the one who did this to you. Sakura exhaled deeply, but, see, it's not really his fault. On his way back from his last mission, this guy, Hinata finished for her, bit him. You know? Sakura asked, her brow furrowed as she attempted to encompass this new information. How do you know? Did he already tell you? No. The man who bit him, he did? What? Sit down, Sakura-san. Please, let's tell each other what we know. The girl with the pink hair did so, astonished that Hinata appeared to be more knowledgeable about Naruto's condition than she was. They conversed for a while, laughing at their inattention and occasionally deviating from the topic before coming back to it. They were relieved that this conversation could be informal rather than serious and intense because it felt different from the conversations they had had with the men. Sakura eventually used her words for it, ultimate hiki, knowing full well the reaction this would cause. She then tried for a brief moment to make sense of the other girls stuttering. The two liked spending time together, and it was good to be able to speak like girls. Sakura made a mental note to spend more time with Hinata after she left that afternoon. Sakura stopped folding her clothes in the middle. She let out a short, tiny sigh and went on to work, arranging her favorite strawberry red dress the way she liked it. Like a store clerk, she liked her surroundings to be attractive, so her room was tidy and lovely. A messy room made it unpleasant to return home from training. Your resting place should be visually pleasing when you're tired, and a disturbed evening was the result of anything else. Sasuke, this is one of those times I really wish you were here. Since she could remember, she had liked the boy, and among other things, She found his clear thinking to be a relief from Naruto's impulsive ideas and her own emotionally charged thoughts. And it was definitely time to think clearly after transforming into an inhuman. Naruto attacked Hinata, who was now attempting to arrange for him to meet with the individual who had transformed him into this. Actually, she was now responsible for that. However, Sakura was merely an observer of the situation, so telling Naruto wasn't exactly an emotional process for her still, though. The observers always had it so much worse, those who were unable to take any meaningful action. She had wanted to become a medic nin for this reason. Among others, it placed her in the role she had previously desired. Instead of waiting, she would be taking action. She would be caring for her friends instead of being preoccupied with their problems. Actually, it was the exact opposite of what she was doing at the moment. With a sigh, she tucked the remaining socks into a drawer and closed it. Stop worrying, she would tell Naruto tomorrow. And they would work this out. She needed to sleep now so she could recover over the next few days. She sensed that she would require it. With a loud yawn, Naruto got out of bed and stretched idly. Working muscles stiff from sleep, he walked slowly into the kitchen without bothering to shower, change, brush his teeth, or splash water on his face. When he woke up at noon, the apartment was warm, just as it usually was. He found a yogurt cup to sip while he waited, filled a kettle with water, and took out a packet of instant ramen. Even though Hinata might not agree, he needed some ramen because his appetite for regular food had returned and the stress of what he'd done to her had somewhat subsided. His breakfast was soon steaming thanks to Hinata's new kettle, which had an undented bottom and boiled water rapidly. He finished the report. Tsunade was most likely bursting a blood vessel about and swiftly devoured the ramen, which was surprisingly full with just one packet. Before being given any more missions, all ninja were required to complete mission reports as a general precaution against inaccurate paperwork. This meant that his paychecks were becoming too far apart for him. He had to send something to the man whose name appeared on the white envelope he received each month, or else he would be accused of squatting. His apartment was old and run down, but it was still owned by someone not enjoyable. He stuffed the report into an envelope and had a clone take it to the Hokage's mail slot after writing a clumsy report that, based on his experience, would get him a glare from whoever had to review it this time, but not in order to redo it. He himself had little desire to leave the house, even though he had spent what should have been enough time up and about to avoid squintiness. The easy sunshine was making him drowsy and the light was a bit too bright. He trudged back to his room, decided to get another half-hour of sleep before starting training, and collapsed into his bed, pressing his face against the incredibly cool pillow while smelling the dust particles floating in the rays between the floor and the window. Only to have a particularly startling memory play out behind his eyes when he woke up 5 minutes after falling asleep. The news that Hinata had met the stranger who had transformed him had come with the dissolution of his clone. He wanted to meet the stranger. Sakura's miso soup was the main reason Hinata's appetite came back strong. "You ran into him on his way to the Hokage's office?" Sakura said, his clone, stirring her soup slowly so she wouldn't blow on it and spill some on Hinata's blanket. She wouldn't know from experience that miso soup did that when someone blew on it too hard, even though its failure to cool down on the way to the Hyuga complex was its fault. It probably dispelled, and he found out unless it didn't dispel, but it probably did, if only to let him know. Hinata said, "Good thing we can be sure of that," as she took a delicate sip of her soup and scooped up another spoonful of warm miso. "This is delicious. By the way, what is the recipe?" Sakura paused, in part to reflect and in part to recover from the shock of seeing tomato-face Hinata eat her soup so elegantly and without her skin showing. "You know, I'm not sure. I think my mom just buys the pre-made cubes and adds them to boiled water. I told her you were sick, and she added some ginseng for you." Sakura cracked a grin. Hinata courteously mirrored her expression and said, "That was very kind of her. Please tell her thank you." "I will. Stir and sip more delicately." Sakura noticed that Hinata stopped to scratch her neck. "Does it hurt?" Sakura looked at her watch. Hinata colored instantly. A document Hinata pointed absently to the side of her neck that had helped Naruto uncover the truth about his condition. "And no, Sakura-san. It only itches a bit, in the spot," she said. Sakura said, "Let me check it," putting her soup bowl down as neatly as she could and moving to brush Hinata's hair aside. Her medic nin's hands were still cold, even though she had just held the hot soup. Maybe, Hinata thought, it's just a natural trait of doctors. She stayed still, as seemed to be the standard response of anyone inspected by an authority figure, in this case Sakura, or they specifically channel chakra to their hands to keep them cold. Hinata jumped as Sakura's icy finger traced over the area, and she realized that an ice pack would have stopped the itching far more effectively than persistent scratching. "Oh, wow, it's really red." However, it might have had the unfavorable side effect of giving her goosebumps all over, which Sakura's sudden touch had just done. What is wrong?" Hinata asked, attempting to remove Sakura's face from her neck. Is it? Hinata nodded, placing her hand on the spot and sating her urge to scratch it again. She pressed her lips together in embarrassment when Sakura carefully removed it from her throat and placed it on her lap. I can't quite be sure, but I think it's bleeding a bit, too, Sakura said apologetically. I'd recommend a salve, but I don't know how any remnants on Naruto's saliva would react to it, what with him not being human and all. Come to think of it, would your family doctor try and put one on you? With a nod, Hinata said, why yes, probably. Sakura walked over to Hinata's closet and opened it to reveal her enormous collection of jackets. Do you have a turtleneck? She asked. Sakura pulled a somewhat formal sweater from the rack with some decorative stitching on the breast and held it up for Hinata's approval. Oh okay, I think we might be able to work with this, she said. The black-haired Kunoichi nodded, but she furrowed her brow as she considered the array in the room and her pajamas. We'll have to rearrange it in here so that it looks like I'm not as bedridden as wearing that would imply. I don't believe I have any sweaters that don't expose the neck suitable for staying in bed, she said, seamlessly transitioning into ninja mode. She looked at their abandoned lunch and said, besides that, I could start perspiring from the blankets or from the miso. It would be best to clean up. She got out of bed, stumbling a little and using Sakura to help her stand. Then she balanced and took advantage of the chance to stretch her legs without toppling a tray and rustling the bed coverings in an un-Harris-like manner. The girls started tidying up the room together before continuing to eat lunch on Hinata's floor, where their folding trays worked just as well as when Hinata's bed was used as a makeshift table. The girls said goodbye to one another after finishing their lunch and engaging in more small talk. Hinata's fingers started scratching at the itchy skin of her throat once more, but Sakura was not there to pull them away or attract attention. Naruto sighed after adjusting his weapons and other tools for the third time, making sure they were hidden and unnoticeable, although it was nearly impossible when ninja were facing other ninja because it was only implied that the other was carrying weapons. Sunset behind his building, in an alley. Unsettling Orochimaru imposter to meet. Additionally, he might have been consuming ramen. A voice murmured, "Good evening, child," from behind him. Naruto spun around, staring at the precise location where the sound had come from. "And I'm definitely not your child," he stated calmly. "I'm not a child." The man said, "You don't agree because you do not know," emerging from the shadows and approaching a reasonable distance ideal for shuriken and kunai. "But you will. I'm afraid I've been a bit inconsiderate with my abrupt departure so soon afterwards." "Fine, whatever. Change me back." "Impossible." The response came right away. "What's more, you have already created another problem for yourself to address before you work on any of your own. Care to guess what it is?" Naruto lowered his anxiously tall shoulders just a little. "Hinata." "Yes, the beauty who smells of rainwater and lilac. Quite an abnormality, an endangered one." "What do you mean?" Naruto felt his new fangs pierce his lower lip. He parted his lips to release them, a little pleased to see the creep appear a little more nervous after their unsheathing. "Your bite will have left Hinata in a dangerous state of infection," the man with green eyes said. "There are two options for her: death and vampirism." He had heard the rumors. Spooky dares from early academy years told them to enter attic number 4 of the school building and risk having every drop of blood sucked out of their body by an undead monster, and colorful Halloween books from childhood described toothy, pale boys who turned into bats after drinking tomato juice. Vampirism, that's what I am. A vampire? He asked. It had never sounded very appealing to him, and the latter was approaching his current state. The man paused before continuing, "There is a way to reverse the process." Naruto's eyes jerked back to the older man's face from the shadows he had been fixed on in thought. "I thought you said it was impossible." The stranger blurted out, "Because of the pain. The pain is unmanageable and intolerable." Even though it was hard to trust them, Naruto kept his gaze fixed on the man, who kept vanishing from view as if the darkness were enveloping him in a shroud and then reappearing. An excellent shinobi trick, but a bad one for an adversary. "We're ninja," Naruto stated in a firm voice, "and we're used to it." With a sympathetic tone, the stranger said, "You most of all," and comfortingly extended a long, thin-fingered hand. "Wouldn't it be nice to have someone like you?" Panic briefly overcame Naruto Jinchuriki. Was this man referring to something like that? The blonde called his bluff when he failed to provide further details, saying, "Thanks, but I have lots of friends. One of them is in danger because of you." "Fine. Then bring her here tomorrow. I will explain the transformation to both of you." The vampire scowled. Naruto's speed managed to get him well away from him before the shadows engulfed him once more. Naruto realized with some trepidation that his attempt to avoid an awkward conversation with Hinata had been in vain and that he would need to speak with her about it anyhow. Shishti. With her hand buried deep in her jacket pocket, wrapped around a shuriken, Hinata cautiously made her way down the dim street. Due to her miraculous recovery, she was able to convince enough people that she didn't require nighttime supervision and present a respectable front to the few people who had paid her a visit, which made it much simpler to slip out. She was currently walking to Naruto's house, which was particularly difficult because she was undoubtedly not at her best and her recent illness had not yet improved as much as she had claimed to everyone, thus, the weapon clutching an excessively paranoid gait. Additionally, every shadow resembled the eerie man who had forced Naruto to bite her. Additionally, she was extremely exhausted. She had to see Naruto, though the man had to tell her what he had said. Additionally, she had to make sure he was eating more than just ramen, the vegetables she had purchased for him. By the time she got to his place, she was about to faint, but she was still able to call out her name when he asked who was there and smile a little when he opened the door. But after that, the room was getting a little darker, which made it very difficult for her to hear what he was saying. But it was strange that Naruto's eyes were still bright. Oh, they were made of silver. She knew this situation. Although his grip was somewhat tight and he had a somewhat sweaty scent, the itching on her neck had stopped. Isn't that good? Oh, it was no longer dimming a little spots of black. Delighted that she no longer needed her own strength to stand, she leaned into Naruto for support. And Naruto, she muttered, not understanding why her neck hurt so much when she moved her jaw. What did he say? She asked. Oh, she was unable to hear him.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.